So have any of y'all ever heard of the lead attorney? He's been on YouTube since around August 2019, introducing himself as being a retired attorney with nearly 20 years experience in criminal law, immigration law, but spending most of his time dealing in family law.
Lead attorney here. Hope you guys are doing well, man. Listen.
Jameson Jamie Campbell was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, attending the University of Georgia School of Law in Athens, just over 90 minutes from his hometown. It was here the lead would learn the fundamentals of practicing law and the justice system, eventually graduating and later accepted to the state bar in 2002. Returning to his native Atlanta, Lead would work at the Seaman Law Firm for about 11 years, but also practice in Mexico, where he'd live on and off for around 5 to 6 years, something he mentions in several of his videos, as well as demonstrating his fluency in Spanish.
But it looks like stuff is going down with La Raza, los Mexicanos, pues ya saben. I moved to Mexico, learned Spanish, became fluent over there. And I lived there off and on, to be honest, for 5 or 6 years.
As I mentioned earlier, the lead mostly covers issues related to family law. So, marriage and divorce, child support and custody disputes, prenups, and the division of marital assets. And according to lawyerdb.org, the league has also acted as a guardian ad litem, or a court appointed guardian for juvenile clients, and a mediator in cases of domestic violence. So clearly, this is a man who can speak on such matters with expertise and firsthand experience. Much like his peers in the legal YouTube space, including Bruce Rivers, Legal Eagle, and even his former co host, AV to the Seventh Power, Lead will often react to body cam footage and give his own play by play analysis of the interactions between law enforcement and the suspects.
Okay.
Okay. Did he grab
He
you?
tried. He tried. He tried. He didn't. He tried.
Oh.
Yeah.
First, she says he was grabbing my clothes, he was grabbing my arms. That's what she wrote in the report. Now that the officer confronts her, she says, well, no, he tried to grab me. He tried. The officer says, well, he didn't grab me. And guys, for all my first year law students, you might have noticed that this officer is kind of interrogating her, asking her questions about what happened, but he has not read her Miranda rights.
Other times, he'll break down a case involving high profile figures such as Cardi B's defamation suit against Tasha K, the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard situation, the Young Thug's RICO trial, and even Tom Brady's divorce with Gisele Bündchen. Beyond that, he'll also live stream the court hearings, comb through all the paperwork and evidence that's available, while informing the viewer of any developments that might be taking place behind the scenes.
Why don't you read this part right here, just a little bit more on the statute, AV?
It's a short list of popular YouTube creators that are either active or retired law attorneys, but the lead has amassed over 500,000 followers by pairing his knowledge of the law and legal procedures with his unfiltered opinions and a quick-witted, often raunchy sense of humor.
Johnny's on some shit, man. Here comes fucking Amber. He had me bent over the bar. I was bent over. You were bent over? I was bent over on my back. Like, what? How are you bent over on your... And then the bottle came out. Oh my God. I just felt him punching my pubic bone. What was he punching the bone? He was punching the bone with the bottle. I'm like, oh my God. He was punching your pubic bone with the, he was using the bottom of the bottle. Oh my God. He was using the bottom of the bottle. No, not the bottom of the bottle. Oh my God.
This was especially true of his live streams, which could typically last from 3 to 4 hours, but could just as often exceed 6, 8, or even 10 plus hours if he felt so inspired. From monologues to one-on-one chats with his viewers, debate panels with other content creators, the lead made his presence known in these marathon-like sessions for his audience. Or as the man himself might say,
I put the whole thing in your mouth.
watching these lives felt very much like having a seasoned lawyer as your personal consultant, and you can understand the legal consequences for any of life's major choices.
Get married with a prenup so that you know that after the divorce, you got a fair deal. How do you know you got a fair deal? Because you wrote the deal down yourself.
As someone who's been following the lead's channel from nearly the beginning, for all the times I didn't agree with him, I could still appreciate how he never shied away from talking about the role that identity and culture play during encounters with law enforcement, the justice system, or society at large. And having little experience with the legal system myself, I always left with a better understanding of how different situations could play out. He often referenced his own perspective as a black man from the Deep South who achieved personal and professional success and frequently dealt with clients in their most vulnerable, sometimes embarrassing moments. But after nearly 6 years, it seems the lead has had a change of heart, and the vibe shift in his content makes it clear he wants to take his channel in a different direction than where he started. Like I mentioned before, many of the topics the lead would discuss revolve around family law, especially on the dynamics of romantic relationships between men and women.
And so in these YouTube streets, I try to protect the brothers. I got a lot of new people that are here, and a lot of people think we just talk about the mainstream stuff, and we do. This channel has some roots in protecting the brothers.
In his own words, the lead started his channel primarily to inform and motivate men, especially black men, to better understand their legal options when it comes to marriage, divorce, prenups, child custody, etc. Drawing from his own experience, the lead explains he was married for over 10 years and drew up his own divorce settlement, or I think at least his notice of grievance, following an argument with his ex-wife.
Guys, not only have I done this document for you, not only have I done it for all these people over 20 years, if I'm being honest, I was married for 10 years. My wife got on my nerves for the last time. I grabbed my laptop and went downstairs, opened it up. She upstairs all pissed off trying to listen. What did she hear? What was on the screen? Bam! This document. Guys, not only do I type it up for you, I type it up for myself. That's how well acquainted I am with this bitch.
Without burying the lead here, pun intended, this often would attract or at least associate him with figures in the Redpill and Manosphere, like Fresh and Fit, whom he openly ridiculed and criticized, to Kevin Samuels, whom he held in pretty high regard, referencing him in many of his videos and even having a one-on-one sit-down interview with him before his passing. While the lead himself has never claimed to be a part of this subculture, he does mention that for all the toxic and counterproductive beliefs that are promoted in the space, there is still value in addressing the grievances that men would express.
So yeah, I absolutely do think it's a community, and I think it's a positive community in general. All communities have their pluses and minuses, but I know the way that men were growing up 30 years ago, and the amount of knowledge that's available to them now because of this space is infinitely more.
For my part, I'll say that while I can agree with this to an extent, where these men and some women lose me is this constant anger with women or feminism at large. And the solution is to just withdraw from engaging with them in any capacity and constantly trying to point out signs of degenerate behavior that wouldn't have been tolerated in the past. Because it's one thing to talk about double standards and negative experiences you've had with people, or make observations about how certain voices are lifted while others are dismissed and ignored, which are all valid concerns to have. But it's another thing to become obsessed with this idea of being left behind, and that if only a certain group of people were put back in their place, then suddenly everything would be right in the world and all your problems would be solved. This mentality is dangerous and often the root of other antisocial beliefs that don't solve the underlying issues, which often develop over years if not decades and in unpredictable ways outside the control of any one group or system. There's no end game when you start to think like this, just hopelessness and destruction. But let's get back to the lead. I first noticed a shift in his content around March of this year when he did a live stream of President Trump's joint address to Congress about 6 weeks following his inauguration for a second term.
There's Ben Shapiro right there. There's Matt Walsh. How did they get an invite? YouTubers are getting invites.
Thank you very much.
Why did I get an invite?
Like most people, the lead explains he never really paid attention to politics when he was younger and had less to lose in life. But as he's gotten older, accumulated wealth and assets, he's much more concerned about the actions of our political leaders. And fair enough, that's a pretty common sentiment for younger people. Despite how animated and vocal they can be about political issues, they have the lowest participation rate in electoral politics, yet they even follow politics to begin with. In any case, the lead is finally speaking on politics directly, and out of all the events that have taken place in recent memory, let alone the 6 years he's been a YouTube creator, he chose this moment. And when Vice President J.D. Vance is spotted during the ceremony, Lead brings up the meeting between Ukraine's President Zelensky, Trump, and Vance himself. The sentiment was clear to anyone who understands what's at stake here. Ukraine is in a desperate position, which is why they were so eager to be accepted in the NATO in the first place, which would all but discourage Vladimir Putin from annexing the territory like he did with Crimea back in 2014. For the record, the reason why Putin is even committed to this war or pressuring neighboring states like Georgia and Moldova to turn away from Western political alliances is to reunite former territories of the Soviet Union, and he's determined to have his way by any means. Since the initial invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022, he's violated no less than 25 ceasefire agreements. So you can imagine my disbelief when I hear the lead refer to Vance as our man because he checked Zelensky for trying to call out the US and embarrass the leadership in such a public fashion.
There is our man, J.D. Vance. Told Zelensky, hey man, it is disrespectful for you to get up in here and try to litigate this in front of the American public. All of this belongs behind the scenes.
Make no mistake, that entire performance was orchestrated by Trump and Vance in order to put Zelensky in his place and make him kiss the ring in order to receive more US support. Whether or not you have strong feelings about US support for Ukraine, hell, even if you outright disagree with it, you got to consider the outcome of Russia becoming a stronger threat to Western-style democracies, especially those around Europe and other US allies. But the lead doesn't seem interested in addressing these facts of the situation, as he just continues on streaming the ceremony and engaging with his followers in the chat. At the end, he once again acknowledges that he's been ignorant about politics for most of his life, but will be doing more related content in the future, and encouraging his followers to participate in the process of fleshing out their own political identities as he does the same.
We're gonna do a little bit more political content, see what the hell's going on. We need to be invested in the process, figure out where we fall on some of these things, become informed. I will be the first one to admit that I am not informed. I don't know about politics, but we're gonna start it up. We're gonna learn a little bit.
When someone is said to be acting in bad faith, they're accused of being intentionally misleading or dishonest about their motivations and understanding of a topic, which can also take the form of self-deception, where they play dumb or ignore facts that are inconvenient to a narrative they're trying to push. And in my mind, the lead provides a great example of this behavior in the 2 videos he made concerning Letitiajames, the Attorney General of New York State. She was the prosecutor who successfully sued Trump and his former attorney, Michael Cohen, for tax fraud and falsifying business records in order to pay hush money to adult actress Stormy Daniels because she and Trump had a one-night stand and he felt it would hinder his 2016 presidential campaign if the story ever came out. The conviction resulted in a $454 million fine against Trump and barring him from running any businesses in the state of New York, while Cohen served 3 years in federal prison for tax fraud, violating campaign finance laws, and lying to Congress. In seeking revenge, Trump has set his sights on Letitia after winning re-election, accusing her of mortgage fraud and pushing the Department of Justice to file a criminal indictment against her. What's notable about the lead's take on this whole situation is how he abandons his usual reliance on hard facts and evidence, but instead quotes right-wing pundits and MAGA Republicans, repeating their claims as if they are all the proof he needs to assume her guilt.
The Trump administration accused New York Attorney General Letitiajames of mortgage fraud. They've made a criminal referral to the Justice Department seeking federal prosecution.
Oh my goodness. Now apparently they've caught her making false declarations in mortgage documents. They're trying to get her indicted. She knows exactly what she did. She knows these documents that she signed.
For instance, one of the claims made about the alleged fraud is that Letitia and her father were listed as husband and wife in loan documents in order to secure more favorable terms for Letitia.
And you're not supposed to do those kind of things.
Okay, so apparently she's lying about how many rooms her house has. She's saying that she lives in one state when she really lives in another. And crazily, she's writing on mortgage documents that she's married to her father. All of these lies to secure benefits for herself.
Funny thing is, the only documents that have emerged so far come from the Gateway Pundit, a right-wing rag similar to the New York Post that frequently peddles in conspiracy theories and has faced several lawsuits for publishing false or misleading information. The documents they source supposedly come from the New York City Department of Finance. However, I haven't been able to verify if these documents are genuine or altered in some way to validate the claims against Letitia. This story was published back in March of this year, so you'd figure if there was any truth to these claims, these documents would be presented as the smoking gun for anyone hoping to confirm her guilt. But after more than 6 months, the case seems to have stalled, with Trump even threatening to fire Eric Siebert, the Attorney General of Virginia's Eastern District, because he believed the evidence against her was weak and doubted if he could even bring an indictment against her. Choosing to leave on his own terms, Siebert resigned from his position. Mind you, he was nominated by Trump himself for the role, and now Trump has enlisted his personal attorney Lindsey Halligan to take up the case as the new Attorney General of that district. And already she's been under fire for the numerous errors made with her indictment against former FBI Director James Comey. Now, while some of these developments happened months after the lead published his videos back in April and May of this year, listen to how he talked about the case at the time.
Letitia James, what is wrong with this lady?
The man in the White House
Democrats.
who can't go a day without threatening our fundamental rights.
Yes.
Letitia James always says that the mortgage fraud charges against her are baseless.
Let me just say to all New Yorkers and to all Americans, the allegations are baseless.
This is lawyer speak. I've been a lawyer for over 20 years, and I'm going to tell you exactly what baseless means, and I'm going to tell you why I think she's guilty. She says these allegations are baseless, that it's a political hit job, that this is just a revenge tour for President Donald Trump. But you know what she doesn't say? She doesn't say, I never did it. She doesn't say, I'm innocent. She doesn't say, I never lied. She doesn't say any of these things, not once, and it's not a coincidence. Calling an allegation baseless is not the same as saying that you are innocent. In legal vernacular, baseless means that you don't think there's enough evidence to convict you. It's a way that attorneys communicate to attack the prosecution's case while not denying the conduct itself. But innocent people don't speak this way. Innocent people say, I didn't do it. They say whoever's making these allegations is lying. They say I'm being framed. But that's not what T.T. James is saying, and that should raise an immediate red flag in everyone's head.
Attorney General James is now asking for money in the midst of all this. She's launched a fundraiser in the form of an event next Tuesday calling for contributions starting at $500, going all the way up to $18,000.
Look at this. She's engaging allegedly in all this mortgage fraud, then has the gall, the audacity to turn around and ask for $18,000 per head. You know what this kind of reminds me of? And I don't want to take this too far off the rails. It kind of reminds me of this. You know, you commit a crime and then you turn around and ask for the public to fund you. Where is the decency? Where is shame gone in 2025? People are out here running around with no morals, no conscience.
So, in the mind of the lead, the mere fact that Letitia is being accused of these crimes, and instead of claiming innocent or being framed, she refers to the claims against her as baseless, this is enough to presume her guilt. Oh, and plus she's a Democrat, so that's a strike against her too, I guess.
Democrats.
This seems like a blatant disregard for one of the most fundamental principles of the U.S. legal system. Innocent until proven guilty. Just because you assume and desire a person to be guilty, or somebody you trust alleges that a person is guilty of a crime, neither of those things prove their guilt.
And I'm going to tell you why I think she's guilty.
Then we get this really gross, shallow comparison to the Carmelo Anthony case, the teenager whom allegedly murdered one of his peers at a school event.
I don't want to take this too far off the rails. It kind of reminds me of this. You know, you commit a crime and then you turn around and ask for the public to fund you.
Yeah, lead, you definitely went off the rails with this one. First of all, that $18,000 price tag in the Act Blue fundraiser, those are related to her election campaign for Attorney General, not to help with her personal finances. In addition to that, those funds were to be split evenly with the political action committee that supports liberal and progressive politicians. Not to mention that people can make smaller donations than the $18,000 price point. But secondly, Letitia hasn't even been formally indicted, though you saw it appropriate to compare her situation to the Carmelo Anthony case, which, as far as I know, that case is still being litigated and he hasn't been found guilty of anything. And if his family wants to raise funds to secure a legal team that will fight to ensure he has a fair trial, then what's the problem? As much as he likes to remind us of his 20 years experience as an attorney and how much authority this grants him to speak on these issues, the lead is willing to ignore fundamental ideas about our justice system and make shallow judgments about the people forced to defend themselves against these accusations. In other words, the lead is acting in bad faith. And wouldn't you know it, despite the national coverage and updates since his last video in May, the lead hasn't provided any of his own reflections on why the case is stalled or the shuffling of prosecutors under Trump's watch. He simply moved on to the next grievance he has, which seems to be with Democrats, or at least people that he associates with Democrats and liberal policies.
Democrats.
As modern and political social issues have energized many people to become more informed, more engaged about what kind of society they want to live in, it's also allowed many to engage in selective outrage. All too common, you'll witness someone expressing strong emotions about the actions, behaviors, ideas associated with one group while downplaying, excusing, and ignoring those associated with another group. Now, we're all human and susceptible to looking at things from a narrow point of view, especially when our emotions are involved. But we also had the ability to question our own beliefs by looking at information and sources that would challenge our assumptions, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable or proves we were just dead wrong. But it's clear the lead isn't interested in any of that, and would rather make content that puts him in the same company as Stevie Knight, Candace Owens, and the Hodge twins, with a focus on black and brown suspects and Democratic political figures. Look, the lead can focus on whatever stories or events he wants to for his channel. If a story is true and can be tied into greater conversations about legal policies, social expectations, and morals, then so be it. Though when you make content that seems to focus solely on the bad actors of a certain group, people are going to wonder why they don't mention those of another group when the information is just as readily available and the crimes or activities are more extreme and disturbing. Since the lead is so passionate and informed about immigration and the ways in which that system can be abused, why not discuss the unlawful arrest and deportations of people like Andrew Hernandez Romero? That was the gay hairdresser with tattoos who was wrongfully associated with the street gang Trendy Aragua. Or Salvadorian Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a construction worker who was wrongfully tied to MS-13, but was in fact fleeing the extortion and threats on his life made by MS-13 in his native country of El Salvador. He was never even charged or convicted of a crime in his native country or the US. Yet he was still deported twice, only to be returned to the US after one was deemed an administrative error and a federal judge later ruled against the Trump administration. And that's to say nothing of the haphazard way ICE has been deployed to openly harass and detain people simply based on their appearance, or the many businesses and industries that take advantage of undocumented immigrants, keeping costs low for American consumers while also saving themselves some money. Or hey, since you're so concerned about Democratic leaders and politicians acting out of pocket, what about the numerous MAGA politicians like former Minnesota State Senator Justin Eichhorn, who resigned after he was caught trying to solicit a 17-year-old girl for prostitution? By the way, this is the guy who coined the term Trump derangement syndrome and pushed the bill to have it listed as a mental illness. Or what about Matt Gaetz, the MAGA Republican who was Trump's first pick for U.S. Attorney General at the Department of Justice? He had to withdraw his nomination after an investigation showed he also had a habit of seeking underage girls for prostitution and organizing drug-filled sexual encounters with them. Or how about R.J. May, a former member of the South Carolina House who used the screen name Joe Biden 69 and later pleaded guilty to distributing hundreds of images and videos of CP. Or maybe you could talk about Robert Morris, the Texas pastor and former spiritual advisor to Trump. While he recently pled guilty in court to decades of child abuse, the story broke in 2024 thanks to Wartburg Watch and the Texas Observer. And even Trump himself has, to put it lightly, a sketchy relationship with women and girls. And that's to say nothing of his decades-long friendship with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and whatever degenerate behavior they were engaged in. By the way, what about them Epstein files, huh? If you're worried about black and brown criminals, especially violent offenders, why not discuss all these white, mostly male perpetrators like Thomas Matthews Crooks and Ryan Routh, both would-be Trump assassins? Oh, would you look at that? Neither of them are pink-haired, transgender black or brown immigrants, huh? And then there's Vance Bolter, a religious MAGA fanatic who killed a Democratic state senator in Minnesota and her husband, RIP to Melissa and Mark Hortman, only after he targeted another Democratic state senator, John Hoffman, and his wife, who both survived after multiple surgeries. Or maybe you could talk about the perpetrators of most school shootings. But I'm sure you can already guess who the usual suspects are in those situations. Hell, even Republican Matt Gowdy isn't afraid to say who it is.
How many school shootings does it take before we're going to have a conversation about keeping firearms out? It's always a young white male, almost always. I mean, did anyone this morning think, I wonder if that was a female?
In fact, the FBI released a study by the National Institute of Justice confirming that right-wing and white supremacist violence is the single largest contributor to domestic terrorism in the United States, outpacing all other sources by a mile. But following the shooting of Charlie Kirk, Trump's DOJ removed the study because it started getting traction as everyone sought to identify the political and cultural affiliations of the shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. For the record, it still hasn't been confirmed what his politics were, but even if we do figure out if he leaned right or left, it wouldn't affect the trend of male right-wing, white extremist violence in the US. When you start to become aware of these trends and all the incidents of corruption, violence, and all forms of degenerate behavior, you start to recognize when it's being omitted from conversations by people who pretend to care about the issue so much, especially when they portray themselves as authorities on the subject. People are complicated. Institutions are complicated. Culture and politics and identity are complicated. So whenever someone begins oversimplifying these issues, you then have to ask, but why though? You know, when I first started thinking about making this video and going back through all the lead's content, the main question I had in mind is, how does a person deviate so much from their previously stated beliefs and understanding to becoming so much more radical, so one-dimensional and lopsided in their point of view? With few exceptions, most people reach a stage in life when they're free to develop their identities for the most part, access information that reinforces their beliefs, congregate with like minded people, and form an idea of how the world ought to be. And along the way, there's the natural question of how to engage with those whom don't share the same beliefs. And that's what makes the lead's transition to full on MAGA, or at least some type of anti liberal, really puzzling. Not because he's a black man and therefore he must be a liberal and always vote for Democrats no matter what, which is how he described himself until his recent political awakening.
I'm black and I'm from the South. Now, if you black and you from the South, what are you gonna be? You're gonna be a Democrat or Republican. How you gonna be raised up? Not that you thinking for yourself, not that you done analyzed it, not that you've critically thought about it. I've been a Democrat all my life until it was like a decade ago they started moving away from us. Now it's, yeah, we're gonna put some men in the girls' bathrooms. We're gonna allow these 16-year-olds to cut their titties off. We're the regular, reasonable Democrat, like, wait a minute. And the Republicans are like, yeah, come on, what do you got to lose?
And not because it seems to contradict the nature of his work in the courts fighting for fairness and justice. It's really a contradiction to his whole existence. See, last year, the lead revealed that he was diagnosed with terminal bone cancer and was forced to slow down his YouTube uploads and his consulting business due to the emergency medical interventions that followed. Watching his videos in the wake of this diagnosis, it's apparent he's lost some weight, seems a bit more sluggish, and his comedic flair and sense of humor is rarely seen these days. So you can imagine my surprise when hearing the lead in one of his more recent live streams. This was concerning Sha'Carri Richardson's altercation with her boyfriend in an airport. Hearing him talk about how he had no idea how the healthcare insurance industry worked, but he's been getting a crash course in navigating the system, especially concerning the expense of quality healthcare and living assistance.
Before I got my diagnosis last year, I'll be honest, I didn't really care nothing about medicine or healthcare because I didn't know about it. Like, you don't really care about stuff that you don't know about. And everybody here is going bankrupt on their Medicare. But do you know, you might have to fact check me. I saw in this certain country, the United States is paying for their free healthcare. Like, we're paying for their free healthcare while people over here going bankrupt.
This was a man who enjoyed the privilege of good health, being able to spend a lot of time building his physique in the gym, and building wealth in a lucrative, prestigious career, but until recently, hadn't really fleshed out his own ideas of politics to match.
Now, I'm from Decatur, all right? I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth in terms of the finances, but I was absolutely born with a silver spoon in my mouth in terms of health. Let me hit you with the bam! Oh my God! Bam! And this was back in the days, guys, when guys didn't like taking pictures. I know it's Instagram and all this, but back in the day, guys, you guys didn't really like taking pictures, but your boy had the abs. I was just athletic.
Fair enough, better late than never. But for fuck's sake, dude, when you do make the choice or you're forced to make the choice of learning more about such a complicated issue, do so in good faith. Because how can you complain about things like the quality of healthcare and cost of medications, then vote and support the party and its leadership who literally defunded hospitals in their latest budget bill, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill? Hospitals are being closed, doctors and nurses and other medical professionals are being laid off, and these people's entire livelihood is centered around taking care of people like you. Hell, Republicans openly brag about how they want to get rid of the ACA, the American Care Act, one of the centerpieces of Obama's reforms that makes it illegal for health insurance providers to deny coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. You know, like terminal bone cancer. Thanks, Obama. Look, I'm not here to pretend that all Democrats and liberals have been on the right side of this issue either. Far from the truth. But on the whole, the liberal and conservative parties couldn't be more opposed on this topic, let alone all the other issues that would be of concern if you wanted to seriously understand the political landscape of the United States. This isn't a lack of information or intelligence on the part of the lead. This is purely emotional. On a final note, in that same live stream, the lead says he puts his faith in Trump because he's going to provide financial security as the US dollar crashes in value. And you know what the lead thinks is the golden ticket out of the economic mess that, ironically, the party of fiscal responsibility has brought upon the American people time after time after time? It's cryptocurrency. No, seriously, cryptocurrency.
I will say, though, I will say this, and no one on earth except for Donald Trump is going to make me and mines wealthy. I will absolutely say that. Guys, if you're into Bitcoin, if you are into Bitcoin, there is no man on earth that is going to give you financial freedom like Donald Trump and all these executive orders. And he's been pushing Powell to drop these dang interest rates down to 1%. And then all these companies are going to be able to get loans for the cheap. What is that going to do to housing prices? What is that going to do to stock market prices? What is that going to do to Bitcoin prices? Oh, what about XPR? Fuck that. I'm talking about the real.
Listen, all I have to say about that is there's a difference between being desperate and being delusional. I wonder if he'll figure that out before it's too late.